Welcome to the Distance to Empty podcast, the podcast where we talk about 200 plus mile ultramarathons and multi-night events. I am your host, Kevin Goldberg, and as always, I'm joined by everyone's favorite co-host, Peter Noyes. Peter, how's it going?
Good. I was away for work all last week, Washington, D.C. Our big event is behind us, so I can now get back to focus training, or at least that's what I'm telling myself.
Good. We need you back. We need to break this cycle of detraining fully and then retraining. There's some people in our friend groups who thought that this podcast would help you not do what you do.
Well, it's been 2 years. That's a pretty good run.
Yeah, it's kind of been 2 years. You had sort of a version of this during those 2 years.
Did I? I can't remember.
I don't know. This is the longest that I've witnessed personally.
Okay. All right.
But we got big things. You got Avalon coming up in 13 weeks, and then we're on the team race at Salton Sea. So I'm invested in this personally.
Okay. And then what about you? How's recovery from Mammoth?
It's good. I am, I guess, just about a little over a week. I finished a week ago Sunday, yesterday. We're recording this intro on Monday. Just a little over a week removed from the Mammoth 200. Only a couple of days removed from the Taco Bell 50K. That was interesting. We missed you out there.
How's your tummy?
Surprisingly good. Wasn't too bad. You know, for those who don't know, the Taco Bell 50K is a ridiculous, unsanctioned event that had like hundreds and hundreds of people, where you have to do a 31-mile loop around Denver and hit 10 Taco Bells and eat at 9 of them. There's some mandatory items like a Crunchwrap Supreme and a burrito. And it was pretty intense. It was definitely a bad idea to do that 6 days after finishing Mammoth 200. But here we are, unscathed on the other side.
Nice.
Well, we will be doing lots and lots of Mammoth content. It's probably going to take us a while. Peter, I got to tell you about all the audio files we got when we stop recording this here. We are going to put together an amazing episode or episodes all about the Mammoth 200, but this episode is not about the Mammoth 200. It is about the Moab 240.
Yeah, no, exciting. We had a blast chatting about it, and I'm sure that runners will get a lot of value out of this one. So excited to get into it.
Yeah, we are, at the time this comes out, we'll just be a couple of days out from the 2025 Moab 240, and we had the pleasure of having a real Moab expert with us, someone who's done the race every year since its inception. He's been on the podium. He's been up at the front of the race many, many times. He's a very, very experienced 200-plus mile runner. We learned he's stood on 21 200-plus start lines, and he was just amazing to have as a resource for this episode. So we can't thank him enough, and let's get to your 2025 Moab 240 course preview with Wes Ritner. Wes, welcome to Distance to Empty. We're excited to have you here.
Great to be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we wanted to bring on an expert on the Moab 240 course. You know, Peter and I have both run the race, but it's been quite a few years, really quite a lot of years for me. Last time I ran it was 2019. A lot has changed since then. And you ran it last year. You've run it a bunch of times. So we're excited to dive in to the course and get a really helpful episode out here for runners who are really about, by the time this comes out, just a few days away from toeing the line. So before we dive into the course, a lot of people know who Wes Ritner is, but in your own words, who is Wes Ritner? How many 200s have you run? And how many Moabs have you run?
I've run all 8 Moabs. This will be the first year I'm not doing it. I've done 21 200s. 3 of those were DNFs, so 18 finishes. Just love the distance, love the challenge of getting out there, interacting with the fellow runners and aid station crew. Just love the whole environment.
Man, I wouldn't have guessed it was 21 starts and 18 finishes. I knew it was a lot. I knew it was more than me, but wow, that's awesome.
I love the distance. I prefer it over any other.
Yeah, well, you've been on our list to have on for an episode for a long time, and we'll have to have you on for your own episode that's not more course preview based here. But we are excited to have someone who's done Moab every year. This is going to be really helpful for people. So thank you again for coming on with us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
All right, let's jump into it and start this course preview. So Moab 240, 240 miles, big loop out and away from Moab, back to Moab. It's beautiful. It's rugged. Peter, do we know how much time they give people to do this? Is it 112 hours?
I think it's 117.
It's 117.
117 hours to get from Moab back to Moab. The course has approximately 32,000 feet of gain. It's pretty it's concentrated. Like the gain is concentrated. There's a lot of flat, rolling, runnable sections, which we'll get into. And we're going to break it down for you section by section and try to offer some tips and tricks for each section on how to be successful. So we're also going to ask Wes to rank each section on a scale of 1 to 5. So 1 would be very, very easy, mostly flat, not a ton of things getting in your way other than your own brain, where 5 would be steep, rocky, loose, technical, sort of like the hardest thing you can imagine. The scale is like contingent to the course. So think of it like ski resort style, where green is the easiest way down and double black is the hardest way down. So just because it's a 1 doesn't mean it's going to be like a bike path, but compared to the course, it's going to be the easiest thing out there. So we'll see how Wes does on his rankings. We'll rank Wes's rankings. No, just kidding. All right, start to Hidden Valley. The race starts at the RV resort there, just outside of town. The first section is just over 8 miles. 1,200 feet of up, 500 feet of descent, and it starts with like 3 miles of pretty much pancake flat through town. My biggest takeaway from this section, Wes, is like people go out so fast. I'm always blown away when I'm at Moab, like seeing the people sprint from the RV park down the bike path into town. What do you think about this opening section to the Hidden Valley aid station? And what do you remember about it?
I agree with you on the speed that people take off at. And I think for most people, it's probably a bad call to do that. There's a lot of races where you go from, a wide starting area and then you drop down almost immediately to some single track. And so you have this mass of people hitting the single track at the same time. With Moab having a couple miles of paved road before you get to that choke point, I think it lends itself to just, go a little faster than you might ordinarily, but don't go crazy. And I see a lot of people taking off like it's a 50K. And, you've got 240 miles to go and you've got 240 miles to pass people if you're interested in doing that. My recommendation is okay, go a little faster than you're going to go at, mile 50 or 80 or 200, but don't kill yourself because the group is going to spread out anyway in those couple miles before you hit the single track. And the nice thing about the single track you hit Pipe Dream Trail, and that Pipe Dream Trail, it kind of just goes up and down, generally going upward to the first aid station. And there's lots of places on that trail to pass people if that's your intent. So there's a bit of a conga line, but it's not the sort of conga line that you sometimes see like at the traditional Tahoe 200 start lately, other than this past year, where they added a 2-mile loop to get the same sort of effect at Moab, a 2-mile paved loop before the single track. It spreads out to people. So don't stress about thinking you need to be sprinting at the start. I think that's a really important point that you made there. And to me, the bigger choke point is in the next section.
And Wes, what do you think about the 12 p.m. start here?
I'm not a big fan of it. You're starting in the heat of the day. The heat of the day is already basically there. If you look at the DNF rate before the implementation of the noon start, DNF rate was about 26% on average for the first 6 years of the race. For the last 2 years of the race that they have done the noon start, it's jumped up to, I believe, 42%, 44%, somewhere right in there for DNFs. Now, there was some additional mileage added for those same 2 years. So that's probably a contributor as well, but it's only about 12 miles that were added. And they did add a few hours of additional time to the cutoffs for the mileage. So I kind of lean towards it's something to do with that change in time that is the bigger impactor on DNFs. I'm wondering if they're going to revisit it at some point because the stats just say there's been a huge, it's a 50% increase in DNFs from pre-noon start to afternoon start.
Well, that's wild. I hadn't recognized that. Interesting. Okay. So the next section is Hidden Valley to Amasa back is mile 8.29 to mile 16.75. So it's an 8.46 mile section with 1,600 feet up and just over 2,000 feet down. And what I remember is that climb right out of Hidden Valley is short, but it's quite steep, maybe even the steepest you'll encounter. Wes, what do you remember from this section?
First, I'll admit to my crime from the previous section, which was not giving it a numerical rating. So to correct that, I'm going to give that a 2. You've the Pipe Dream Trails. It's got some technical spots and it's got some ups and downs, but it's not particularly hard. Anyway, to this section, yeah. So I think the bigger choke point to me, at least, in the race, is when you leave that first aid station at Hidden Valley. I think a lot of people who sprint to Hidden Valley or sprint down the pavement then spend 5 or 7 or 10 minutes at that aid station. And so you get a group of people starting to form there, and then they're about to head up that steep climb that you referenced up the mesa. To me, the better tactic is maybe carry 1 extra bottle of water, drink it on the way to that aid station, and then just blitz right through the aid station without even stopping, and avoid some of the choke point effect that then happens as you go up that mesa. The mesa is it's one big rock step up to the next big rock step up for the most part, and people start really going slow through that. Understandably, I go slow through it. So you can end up in a little bit more of a conga line there, not in terms of number of people, but in terms of becomes very difficult to pass anybody on that thing, and everybody's going slow, including yourself, and it's a lot of work. So it's just, in my mind, better get through that aid station quickly, accept the conga line, and then once the conga line, the climb up the mesa. A lot of people use poles there for that climb. I'm not a fan of poles for that climb at all, actually. I don't like where you have to reach really high with your pole to get to the next step, because it does you really no good and just kind of wastes your time and effort. And you're doing that again and again. Not that every step is huge, but you're doing a lot of that. And the ground is so technical that if you're not doing that, you're looking closely at the ground to see where to put the tip of your pole. And it all just takes your focus away from just step on up. You get up to the top of that mesa, though, and if you're somebody who's going to hike a gentle ascent, it's great. The trail is smooth for the most part, gentle ascent as you approach the slick rock. So if you've brought your poles at this point in the race, it's a good time to probably use them, whether you're running or walking, depending upon if you like using poles on uphills. But smooth, easy going. You get up to the slick rock, and terrain drops downward a bit. There is a hard right-hand turn that's sometimes hard to see if it hasn't been marked particularly well towards the bottom of that descent before you start then going up the slick rock on the Moab Rim Trail there. Good section, runnable in a lot of parts. You come off the slick rock for a little bit before you do a sharp descent down some steep slick rock to the road, and the road finishes, I think, about 2 miles of pavement where you can make up some time if you felt you were moving a little slow before that. But I'm going to give that, we'll call it a 3 for difficulty. I think climbing up the mesa adds a lot to it. And then if you're just not used to running down steep slick rock, that can slow you down a bit and make it a little tougher.
Yeah, and that road section into Amasa back is nice. You'll see crew vehicles will be cheering you on often. They're going out to see their runners, and it's a nice reprieve. You're not going to get like another easy couple of miles of pavement for quite a while. So I feel like it's a good, you're almost 16 miles in. So it's a good little reset before you kind of head into that first night. And Wes, would you say that with the exception of the final section going down Porcupine Rim, most of the slick rock in this race is in this section and the next one, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you get past those sections, you'll see a little bit elsewhere, but not like you'll see in those first couple of sections, or the second and third section, I should say.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, cool. So Amasa back, mile 16.7, almost mile 17. This is a really critical aid station just because the way this race is laid out. You're not going to see your crew here after Amasa back for a long time. So Amasa back is going to be the first aid station that you see your crew at. It's a very easy aid station for your crew to get to. They just cruise down Cane Creek Road. If they're watching the tracker, I mean, it takes probably less than 10 minutes from Moab to get there. So they can get there very easily, not likely to miss you. Although I did drive on the other side of the river my first year crewing Moab. Like the GPS took me to the other side of the river. So I drove all the way out to Amasa back, but on the wrong side of the river. So don't do that. But it's pretty clear and a very easy, accessible aid station for crew, and an important one, not because of it being far into the race, but if you forget something here, it's going to be a very, very long time before you get it again. Vivid memories of Peter, not far after this aid station, texting us and saying he needed a new pair of shorts. And we were like, well, we'll see you in 50 miles. Good luck.
Yes, and now it's even more than 50 miles since nobody can go to Indian Creek.
Yeah, now it's really, really far. So
yeah,
camel up here. Take what you need. If you think you might need a puffy, throw, like, you're, in my experience, even if you're trying to race at the front of these things, like, I've never been like, man, I wish I didn't take that. I really haven't. Once it's on your back, it's on your back, and it just doesn't matter that much. So if you're on the fence, I would say take it. This is a very long supported stretch of this race in the sense of crew. So if you have crew, make sure they set you up well here, because it's a really critical aid station for that. Okay, the section itself. So you've done all your things, you've gotten everything you need, you've gone through a checklist, and you have everything you need for 1,000 miles till you see crew again. And now you've left Amasa back. You've got a pretty long section here, 12 and a half miles or so to base camp. And this has a lot of gain and loss squeezed into a 12-mile stretch, 21 feet, 100 feet up, 2,100 feet down. I remember this section being like, you're kind of along the river for a while. It's very up and down, steep but short, really beautiful section. And a lot more slick rock and stuff like that. But Wes, what do you think about this one?
A couple things. First, I'll just re-emphasize your comment regarding the aid station and the importance of treating that aid station seriously. Having a plan before you get there, and particularly around hydration. Especially if it's a hot day, take enough water. Add an extra bottle or two that you just don't even know if you're going to use, and you'll probably use them. Dial in your hydration is the bottom line, and don't use this as a section where you decide you're just going to save weight by not taking quite enough water or other fluids. So anyway, with that in mind, that the ascent up that mesa is really the first place where I think poles are really warranted. Now, most years, probably 6 of the 8 years, I have not carried poles until picking them up at Indian Creek. 2 years, I think I have used them. And they do come in handy there, especially if you're a big fan of poles, to get up that mesa, because it is a bit of climbing. But personally, I usually prefer just waiting till Indian Creek for that. But I know a lot of people just really like the benefit of saving their legs early, which is in most cases a good call. So having them there is beneficial. Yeah, the route itself then is really well marked for the most part. There's a couple tricky turns right before you get to Jackson's Ladder, which is that essentially a climb down the other side of the mesa on an established trail that's pretty steep, pretty rocky, very technical. For that descent, I just recommend be efficient going down it. You don't want to waste time on it. But I see some people that look like they're hurrying down it, trying to, really gain some time. You're only going to gain so much time on that descent. And it's rocky enough and steep enough and slick enough that the odds of, if you're hurrying, slipping, tripping, whatever, and ending up with an injury that it may not take you out of the race, but that kind of screws with you for the rest of the race, is that the probability is high enough that, I go efficiently and move down it. And then you're down onto the long stretch you mentioned, where you're now going essentially up Lockhart Basin area. Dusty trail, not really a technical trail. If it's rained recently, there can be a couple little wet or mud spots, but in general, it's an easy route there. All the dust that you're seeing there, you're going to see up that entire valley or basin that you're going through. And so to me, the point there and throughout much of Moab is, make sure you have shoes that aren't allowing grit and dust to get in through the toes. I mean, almost any shoe eventually is going to allow some stuff in, but there are some shoes that are better at keeping out and some that are worse. Make sure you pick the ones that are better, because that can really mess with your feet in the race. But anyway, other than that, it's a once you get down Jackson's Ladder, you can make some good time. There's some ups, but none of the ups are long or steep. So a good opportunity to just kind of start getting in that mindset going up this valley of, you're going to have mesas for the most part on one or both sides of the area that you're moving through, and just get used to locking in, get a strong pace. Not going to be a lot of climbing, and just keep trucking along. So I'm going to give that one probably a We'll give it a 3. Primary reasons being it is kind of a tough climb, steady climb out of the Amasa back area, up that mesa. And then Jackson's Ladder has a little risk with it if you're being a little too speedy. But once you get past that, I would drop the rest of that route to a 1 in terms of the difficulty.
Yeah. Once you get down to that valley, it's a double track is really pretty chill.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't recommend anyone changes their shoe choices now when listening to this episode, but
Yes.
I did want to call out, like, we're sponsored by Mount to Coast, and they've been really great to us. And I'm the H1 is a new shoe. I kind of took a flyer running Mammoth in it. I had been running around the neighborhood a lot in it, but really hadn't done like more than a 10-mile run in it. Probably logged about 100 miles total. And it was my first 200 finish where I didn't take the shoe off once. I start to finish, no sock changes, and Mammoth is probably the sandiest course I've run. I had gaiters on, and there wasn't even that much sand in the shoes when I emptied them out at the end of the race, and no blisters, just like totally probably the best shoe experience I've ever had. It was a little bit undershoed for that race, like it's a hybrid, road to trail shoe. But given how well it performed, I'll take a little less traction any day over just I think finding the perfect shoe is better than having the right shoe for the terrain sometimes.
I think a lot of the time.
Yeah.
In a race this long, in a 200 miler, fit is more important than traction.
Function. Yeah.
It's hands down.
Yeah. So don't go out and buy Mount to Coast for this year's Moab, but maybe do it for your next 200 is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. So 3 and then going down to a 1 at the end of this thing. I think that's an awesome ranking.
All right. So the next section is base camp to the Oasis. So mile 29 to basically mile 53 and a half. And I think this is the section that prompted the time change to noon. It's nearly a marathon. It used to be, in the heat of the day. It's brutal down there, at least from what I remember. I did it with the early start, and that there is a water stop partway through. I think in the past there's been some challenges with water running out. I'm hoping that those are solved. I'd love your perspective. So I think I died a little bit in this section.
Yeah. So base camp, I mean, this whole next 2 sections are very similar to one another. And the key point you've already made, and that is it's the heat again. This is, especially in a hot year, it is a very hot race. There is so much sun exposure throughout the entire thing. Shade is an exception. Cover from trees is an exception. The only shade you're going to get in this entire section is when you occasionally, and the next section, when you occasionally kind of you're winding through and around these mesas, as the mesa goes this way, you go this way, and so forth. And you're going in and out of where you're a little closer to the mesa, a little further from the mesa. And you can get a little shade briefly when you're close to the mesa, and then you're back out in that sun exposure again. And so carrying enough water out of here again is key. And it's going to be the same in the next section. The road itself that you're on, it's a 4x4 road, but it's not what I would call a rugged 4x4 road. It's smooth, it's dusty. A lot of 4-wheelers have been on it, and so you're running through a lot of dust. Not cloudy dust that's getting up in your face unless you're running directly behind somebody, but dust that's going to get in your shoes. If you don't have gaiters, it's really going to get in your shoes. But overall, I'm going to call it really a 1. There is a couple thousand feet of ascent, so we'll call it a 1+, I suppose. It's, kind of like I described before, as you're heading to base camp, just you got to be in the mindset of you're just running down this very similar terrain on a 4x4 dirt road for a long time. And I think it's more of a mental game for some folks than it is a physical challenge, just because you do have such smooth roads. Poles can come in handy here on occasion for these short little climbs that you'll be doing, some of which are kind of steep, but they're all very short. And so, again, I'm not a big fan of toting my poles around for all of the 26 or however many miles, or really 35 miles if we can't both kind of to the base camp and then all the way to Indian Creek, where for the most part the poles aren't useful. They don't weigh much, so I get it that some people like to carry them through that section, especially if you want to take advantage of the extra leverage on the hills with the push off force of the poles. Yeah, I mean that's about it. So you'll see some pretty areas on the mesas and so forth that are cool, but just be ready for same terrain for quite a while, all the way to Indian Creek, really.
Yeah, yeah. I remember this just being, like you said, just long, very like the big challenge here is not the terrain, it's the length of time between aid. And it's just like kind of the same thing for a very long time. I mean, you're almost running a marathon with a water stop, but it's like it's long. I imagine with the 12 p.m. start, most people are going into night for this section, probably more night than not. This is the section where in 2019 I left base camp without any of my food, and Mika left base camp without her headlamp, and we teamed up to get to 24 miles later. But Mika's vegan, and all she's like, you can have this applesauce. And I'm like, I want something more substantial. It was an adventure we had. We both got through it though.
You know,
Um,
one other call out I will make that you just reminded me of with the water stop is short. I think it's shortly after the water stop, you hit this little canyon area. Most people are going to hit it in the dark, and the trail is pretty well marked, but there's some places where it's just hard to mark, and you really got to be attentive to that section because it's easy to go down a wrong little channel of the canyon because it kind of splits up into little temporary sub canyons, we'll call it. And it's easy to go down the wrong one. And then you find you're at a dead end and you're wondering, am I supposed to climb up that thing or do I need to go back? And anyway, it's a place where you want to be attentive, but it can also be a place because it's dark for just about everybody. You know, you might be getting a little tired and you're not quite paying as much attention, especially since you just came through a section where it's almost impossible to get lost.
yeah, yeah, no, that's a good call. There's a lot. It's a big space out there. Lots of lots of offshoots and everything. And for the water drop, I mean, it's just based on the way this section is, like the water drop's only what 4.5 miles or so from base camp. So be strategic. Like make sure you're drinking as much as you can from base camp to that water stop, because then you'll want to fill up there and so just be strategic and don't fly through 4.5 miles and be like, oh, I barely drank anything, I don't even need this water stop, because then you're looking at a 25-mile stretch without holding everything from base camp. So I think that's something to consider as well.
Yeah. The I guess the only thing I'll mention is the Oasis, which is your next aid station stop. It's down kind of in some lower ground to what you're running on as you approach it, and it's always a joy when I am up on the mesa, and it's nighttime with a new noon start. And I look down and I can see the lights of Oasis. And I'm like, okay, I'm a mile away and this 25-mile section is almost over.
Yeah.
And then it's pretty much downhill from there to the Oasis.
Yeah. Yeah, and the Oasis is the one that they always say, like, you can't drop here. Like it's
Yes.
it's a rugged, remote 4x4 access aid station. I think they say you're going to be sitting there for hours and hours and hours if you do decide to or have to drop there. So the Oasis is not a accessible aid station by any means. 20 miles over 4x4 roads, like use it and get out of there. Indian Creek is even though it's not crew friendly this year, it's a much more front country aid station. Oasis to Indian Creek. So now where Oasis is, mile 53.5, Indian Creek mile 68, a little over 14 miles, 1,700 feet of ascent, 1,500 feet of descent. I don't remember this section very much. I remember there being decent climbing near the start. I think it's kind of a continuation of that like double track road, but this is kind of a blur for me. So we'll lean on you for this one, Wes.
Sure. So it starts with a nice downhill as you leave the aid station. So you can kind of get a good start into it for, I think it's a mile and a half, 2 miles downhill. And then you're generally working your way upward to Indian Creek. But again, it's a lot of little ups, little downs, a bit more climbing after that first descent, but overall an easier section. Again, a little tougher than the last one. If I were to rank with this one, it's probably a 2, maybe, just partially because everybody's getting a little tired. It's late at night or early in the morning. There's, as you get close to Indian Creek, there's a couple little offshoots of roads that if you're not paying attention, you can actually end up slipping onto one of those. I know one year I did and didn't notice for, I don't know, just a couple tenths of a mile. At some point, fortunately, some of them don't go far. They dead end into little camping spots and so forth. But at any rate, point being, just by that point, you're getting close to the aid station and you may not be looking quite as much at the markers, and especially if you're tired. So be careful there. It's still though on that same dirt road that goes through that entire basin. For the most part, easy to follow. Don't expect any water on this route unless the course marking crew specifically calls it out. There have been a couple of years where there have been some recent rains and you'll see some mud puddles, some of which are in the road, and I wouldn't filter from because you don't know whose oil has dropped into that from their leaking oil pan on the 4x4. But so I have never filtered water there. And there's even one that's like, I guess I'll call it a small pond sometimes, very small pond. Even it looks pretty sketchy. And I've filtered some pretty sketchy water at like Bigfoot and so forth, but I just don't like filtering water that a bunch of 4x4s have potentially driven through or over. Anyway, I would just plan on no water.
Yeah.
It's better to have the extra fluids anyway. So yeah, it's this section, probably the first 2/3 of it ish is identical to what you've been running through in the whole basin. And then you start getting towards more non-stereotypical desert terrain, as you approach Indian Creek. Don't get me wrong, you're still in the desert, but
Right.
It's just not quite as dusty. And you may even see some trees, small trees, as you get closer to Indian Creek, whereas you probably haven't seen a tree other than from afar in the rest of the course ever since dropping down from Jackson's Ladder.
Yeah. If my memory serves, I think, and obviously it could be cold anywhere, it could be hot anywhere, like be prepared for anything. But generally, I feel like you're probably not going to be cold before Indian Creek, but after Indian Creek at night, you're starting to get into places that get pretty cold down in those washes and valleys.
Yeah. If we're going to just jump into the next section, that's one of the coldest places.
In that wash.
After Indian Creek, when you get down to that low ground at the dry wash. Yeah. If you hit that at the wrong time of early morning, you better have some layers.
I think I had 3 pairs of gloves on.
Yeah.
And I was still cold. So Indian Creek this year, before we let Peter dive into the next section, this is kind of another like critical checkpoint, I would say, where, Amasa back, we really stress the importance of leaving there prepared. So historically, this was the end of a very long stretch, about a 50-mile stretch without crew. But this year, there is no crew at Indian Creek. So that stretch is getting longer. You can have a pacer drop off here, and I think many people who have pacers will have that pacer drop off. One thing, and I would verify this with the race just to make sure it's kosher and something that's okay. But I would assume, based on rules of previous years' races and other races that do these things, is that a pacer could bring you nutrition and or trekking poles or stuff like that, so long as you're carrying it. I think they'd be able to bring it out to you. Would you agree, Wes? I mean, I do think they should check with the race.
Yeah. So because it's a little different this year with this whole Indian Creek thing. So I am going to suggest check with the race also. However, I think I read that pacers can't bring you food.
Okay.
Because it's giving you almost a crewed advantage. It's almost like that pacer is now crewing you. So I believe it specifically states not allowed.
Okay.
Check with the written materials we've been given, or ask the question of the
I think that's a great question to ask. I wish I had found out beforehand, because it makes sense. I mean, I would agree with that being an advantage for sure. But if it is something that's allowed, it's definitely something you should take advantage of, whether it's gear or food. But definitely, that's something you want to make sure you're following the rules and keeping things fair for everyone. But either way, the pacer itself will be an advantage if you're able to get one there. And just, I would say, again, we're a little late in the game here for changing things up big time. It's going to be a long slog for that pacer. So make sure it's someone who is up for the task, is ready to put in some big miles, and is going to be able to keep up with you and support you out there. But Indian Creek is it is a sleep station. I remember it being a really great aid station. All the destination trail aid stations are really robust and have the things you need to take care of yourself. But this one in particular, I remember being a great place to, unlike the Oasis, even though it's named the Oasis, the Indian Creek is the real oasis out there.
Yeah, it's a great station, always well supplied with food and good selections. I would also add, if you haven't carried your poles to this point in the race, either Indian Creek or the island is a great place to pick them up because there gets to be a little more climbing at that point, especially once you leave the island. But they can also come in handy once you pass through the low ground after Indian Creek. So anyway, if you haven't carried them, stick them in your drop bags for one of those two locations would be my recommendation.
Right. So Indian Creek to the island, this is roughly mile 69 to mile just shy of 82. So it's right around 14 miles with 940 feet up and 329 feet down. Now, I do remember this section pretty well. I remember it had been so long in the basin, doing all the same thing. It was just weird to all of a sudden be on a road. So that, you're back on pavement for a little bit in this section before getting back on trails. And then I remember the washes. It was, room for getting lost, I would say, in those washes. So, yeah.
So, the first ascent you do when you leave Indian Creek, you're on a dirt road for just a little while, passing through the Indian Creek campground area. Great place for if your legs are getting a little tired. That is a great place to start using the poles. Then you hit that paved road, which is initially a little bit of an ascent, not much, but a gentle grade, and then you descend down to where you're going to end up turning off. I would just say watch out for that turnoff. One year I did end up being with another runner and we were chatting and we walked right past the turnoff and just added some extra miles to ourselves as we had to turn around and come back to where we were supposed to have turned. It is marked well, and if you're paying attention, you're not going to miss it, but it is possible, again, just because a lot of people are tired going through that section. So you hit a dry wash, then you hit, which is really kind of the low ground of the section. That is where we mentioned that it can just really be freezing, just surprisingly so, especially if it's a year where there happens to be a temperature inversion in the area, which I think is semi-common in the Moab area around the October timeframe, where it's actually warmer at higher elevation and colder at low elevation. And again, if you didn't prepare adequately with having some layers to throw on, you're going to be miserable. Once you go through that dry wash, which isn't always a dry wash, there have been 2 or 3 years where it's actually had water in it, sometimes up to 5 or 6 inches in places, and you end up getting your shoes pretty wet. So if it has been raining recently and you don't like being in wet shoes, you may want to put a pair of shoes in your drop bag for the island. Most years it's not necessary, and if you go through that water in the daytime, the Moab sun's going to bake your feet dry regardless. But if I came through in the night and it had rained really recently, I think I would toss those shoes into that drop bag. Other than that, you hit some, besides that main dry wash, there are a couple other little short dry washes that can get very muddy and slick if it has rained recently. Otherwise, they're going to be dry as a bone. A couple of them are just like short little drops where you kind of have to almost climb down and climb back out the other side. But overall, not a difficult section. And then when you get real close to the aid station, you'll pass through a little campground that's an out and back, and you'll find the island aid station. Not a lot of climbing in this. I will probably rank it. I'll give it a 1 overall. It's just not that tough compared to some of the other sections. Not quite as flat as some of that stuff you did in the basin, but still pretty easy.
Yeah, it's just really if it's cold or not is the big challenge, I think, on this one.
Yeah, so absolutely.
Be prepared. Looking at the weather forecast, I mean, it looks pretty good. I mean, getting cooler throughout the race. Doesn't look like it'll break 80 on Friday, but there is some moisture. I'm looking at the percent chance of precipitation is, 1% to 4% through Thursday, and then it jumps up to 24%, 47%, 59%. So they're listed as thunder showers, but in Moab, you just never know if there's moisture in the area. It's possible that it will release. So be ready for anything. I think out of all the 200s we talk about, Moab is the weatheriest. That's not a word, but you know what I mean.
I like it.
It has it all. All right.
There have, just for total newcomers to the Moab 240, there have been 2 years where it snowed heavily enough right before the race that there were major reroutes through the Pole Canyon to Geyser Pass section. I don't foresee that happening this year, but it has.
Wes, I don't know if you remember in 2019, the unmanned water drop by Lake Uwa was frozen solid.
I didn't try to use it, so I never realized it had frozen solid.
Frozen solid. I think it was single digits, and the water was frozen solid. So hopefully you guys don't get single digits out there. It doesn't look like you will. It looks like the lows are well above it being possible to be that low, but you just never know. All right. I think this next section is sort of what I consider like the precursor to things getting really hard. This is like, it kind of sneaks up on you. But this next section is the island to Bridger Jack. So you're getting close to the 100-mile mark here at the end of this, miles 81-ish to 96-ish, about 15 miles, 2,200 feet of up, 700 feet of down. I remember this being sort of like the ascent section to the climb of Shea Mountain. So you're climbing pretty steadily the whole time, leaving, I think, Lavender Canyon. Like it's harder on paper than it is in reality, but it is the beginning of things getting real, kind of.
Yeah. It's the first section where I definitely want to use poles for me personally. Legs are starting to get tired and I want to save my legs. And it's never really a steep ascent. I mean, I'm sure there's a couple little exceptions, but it's never really steep. But it's definitely an ascent that you're doing. And a lot of it's runnable if you're good at running ups. And there's some flatter sections as well, of course. But it's basically a steady climb. You've got a little bit of a drop just as you start passing through the coming back from the aid station on that out and back to the trail, and then it's basically climbing the whole way. The only real call out on this section for me is that I have experienced losing satellite signal when I've gotten really close to the Bridger Jack Mesa, because it's a big mesa. Sometimes the trail gets a little close to it. And I know one night I happened to get off trail and then I was just getting all kinds of wacky GPS signals that one moment I was way, left of the trail. And then 2 seconds later, I was way right of the trail. So, just be aware of that. It's not a big issue, especially if you're going into daytime, because the route is pretty clear. I think mentally I was probably a little tired, that added to the confusion. But nonetheless, you could have some satellite problems there. I mean, other than that, just grind out the climb. It's kind of a neat area to look at. You can see some offshoots of the ground that you're on that's nicely treed. So you're starting to get, like you said, the Shea Mountain, where it's more of a traditional mountainous area with some actual trees and therefore some actual shade at places. But as a whole, the section's going to be pretty exposed. Again, unless depending upon if you are passing near the mesa and the sun is, in that same direction, then you get some shade. So I'm gonna call this one a 3, maybe a 3+, just because of the fact that it's pretty constant ascent. So be ready for it, because it's the most continuous climbing, I think, that you've done until that point. The mesas that you've done before are steady, but I think the mileage on those ascents just isn't as long previous to this. And then you're, of course, coming up on the Shea climb, which is definitely a tough one.
All right, so let's get into Shea Mountain. So Bridger Jack, mile 96.5 to Shea Mountain, 114.2. So this is almost 18 miles, just over 4,000 feet of ascent, 2,300 feet of descent. Yeah, what I remember about this is, coming down to Bridger Jack, it was runnable for me. I remember cruising on some trails for a bit, feeling great. Then all of a sudden you get to a riverbed. It's like, where even is the trail? That threw me for a loop. That it was a little hard to navigate there. And then, finally up to Shea Mountain. I really only remember the single track part of Shea Mountain. It's quite steep, but there's a whole descent and sort of fire road climb after that too. So I think this was a tough one.
Yeah. Right up front, I'll say it's a 5. This and one other section, I would give 5s too. You're absolutely right on the first portion of the race or of the section, where there's just a little bit of climbing out of the aid station, and then you've got some nice descent. It's been a while, so I'm gonna call it a mile or 2 until you turn off. But you hit this road after that ascent, that little ascent out of the aid. Mile or 2 on dirt road, really runnable. Take advantage of it, have some fun, some neat views from that road. And then there is a sharp turn, like I'll call it a 160-degree turn to your right, that they now mark very well, because so many people, including myself, have run right past it when they didn't mark it well. And you make that sharp turn, and then you're going to continue down for a while still. But it is on single track. It's on some very steep, actually, single track at some times that's pretty slick. But as a whole, that trail is still pretty runnable, especially if your quads are up for it. And you can make some great time on that road. Makes some good time still going down the rest of this to the dry wash that you talked about. There will probably be some parts on that descent, even for those running it, that you may want to slow down to a walk just because it is so slick. But anyway, you get to the dry wash. There is somewhat of a trail on the right side of that dry wash. It meanders to the left and it meanders to the center sometimes, but for the most part, it's more on the right side. That gives you at least something to follow. Otherwise, yeah, you just kind of finding your own path through that dry wash. Again, the turn out of that dry wash is another, call it 160-degree turn over your right shoulder that it's not quite as hard to miss as long as you're watching for it. But you take that turn and then you're on more single track, and it's going to be your first water available when you're on that single track, when you're about to start the serious climb. I think it's right around mile 6 that you hit the stream. I always plan on getting water from that stream. There are a couple other streams along the way, but I usually skip the others at about mile 13. Pretty much every year there's some water that the runner manual does not call out the water that is typically available at mile 13. But my approach is have enough water to get to mile 6 and fill up at mile 6, and then just get into the mindset of grinding up the hill. It's a tough climb. It can be, despite the trees that you're going to pass through, there's a lot of exposure in various places to the sun, so it can get very hot if it's a hot day. Just be ready for the fact that the hardest part of the climb is the end of the climb. So as you're looking at your elevation profile and thinking, wow, my climb's almost done, this is it's good, just be ready. You're about to hit the really hard. And it's not impossible. It's just even more steep and a little more rocky than what you've been going through. But it's not that tough section is not that long. You get up to the top of that ridge, and then you've got a lot of down. I love, it's not entirely down. There's some flats and there's some ups in there. But as a general statement, you're pretty much heading down to the low point of the rest of the section on a dirt road. If you have some good legs at that point, you can make some great time on that whole post ascent section of the course. You get down to that low ground, roughly mile 13-ish. I think it's a 17-mile section. I'm looking over my chart here, 17 or 18 miles, just shy of 18 miles for the section. I think it's about a 2-mile climb then that you've got up that dirt road. And there's water right before that isn't called out in the manual. That's the one I hit. I aim to make sure I'm consuming enough fluids. I always try to make sure I'm empty before I hit that spot, and then I'll just fill up a bottle for my last 2 miles and charge on up the hill as best I can. For most people, including myself, it's just going to be hike it up it as fast as you can. Most of it is steep enough that you probably aren't going to run it. There are some shallower sections that you can run if you're wanting to run some uphills. Anyway, it's a tough section, and it's all about that climb. You've probably beat up your quads coming down from Bridger, and now you're needing those muscles to get you up that hill, and it makes for a tough section. So as I said at the start, it's a 5.
So far, your rankings have been exactly what I would rank everything. So you're killing the rankings, in my opinion.
Excellent.
Yeah, this is a hard section. It's the first very, very hard section, in my opinion, too. Cool. All right. So we'll touch a little bit on crew at Shea and Monticello. So obviously there's a sort of a lottery. You get this or that for Shea Mountain or Monticello for crew. I've never been to Monticello Lake. I remember Shea Mountain is a little out there to get to, but it's not a terrible drive up there. And it's not a terribly hard place to find. I mean, most of these aid stations from here on out are going to be pretty remote and out there, but you just plug in the coordinates, and as long as you have even a small SUV, I think you'll be fine on most of these. So I remember getting to Shea Mountain being not too bad. It's a great aid station. Peter and I, when we did this race, both crewing it and running it, there was this section from Shea Mountain to Monticello Lake was non-existent. You just kind of started going down after Shea. So this next section is all US. It's 12.2 miles. 300 feet of up, 2,400 feet of down. It looks like it's another pretty stout section, but pretty straightforward, straight up, straight down. And then we get back to sort of the traditional course after that. So this was that 12-mile addition that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. So this section, number one, I would plan for the section as if it had no water on it. are sometimes two streams, but the streams are almost non-existent. There's one that you hit a mile out of the aid station that is virtually worthless because everybody has water still a mile out of the aid station. And even then, it tends to be more muddy slop than an actual stream. And then the other potential stream is, I think it's about 5 miles into it, between 5 and 6 miles into it. There is a super small stream. To get water from it, sometimes it doesn't even exist, but if it exists, you would literally have to kind of dig a little hole so the water would pool enough to dip a bottle into it. So plan on no water being available on the route. The route itself is I'll call it relatively challenging because you start out with an up, especially if you're not used to elevation. You're going up to a higher or the highest point in the course. I don't recall if this is literally the highest or if Pole Canyon gets higher, but either way, you're going up higher than you were at Shea. It's a good climb. Much of the climb is covered with some trees, so you'll get some shade from the sun if you're going through it during the day. You hit a ridge line, go over that ridge line, and it's almost until the aid station, it's mostly down, which is nice. Slightly technical in places. Got to watch your step a little bit, but very runnable down. And the ups that you have from there to the aid station really aren't that long. You drop down, pass through this meadow, and then you hit the road that means you're almost at the Monticello Lake aid station. So, it's a moderately challenging section, I'd say, partially because it's just getting further in the race. Elevation and the climbing probably added together. I'll call it a 4. It's maybe a low 4, but I'll give it a 4. Definitely easier than what you just did in Shea by far. Anyway, I don't know that I have any other call outs. I mean, I'd be using poles, that for that first half of the section because of the climb. I tuck them away for the second part because the ups just aren't that bad and you can make better time, or at least I can make better time when I'm not wielding the poles. And
what type of trails are we looking at on the down? Like, are they technical, runnable?
They are, so I would call them a runnable, mildly technical at places section. I think most people, if they're feeling good, are going to run it. But, it's got some sharp switchbacks that are going to slow you down a bit, and the technical spots are going to slow you down. So depending upon how you're feeling. I know if I'm feeling good, I'm definitely running that down.
Yeah, that deep in the race, you just, it could be a bike path and it's not runnable for you, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so the next section is Monticello Lake to Dry Valley. It's mile roughly 126 to 144. So 17 and a half miles, 800 feet up with over 3,000 feet down. This is another section that neither Kevin or I have seen at least the first part of it. I assume it meets up with the old course at some point. But it looks mostly downhill and just long, but maybe runnable.
So first of all, yes, very runnable. And there are some very rocky portions in the latter half of it that, depending upon whether you like running on, it's kind of like fist-sized rocks-ish. A lot of it's like flat. It's probably not shale, but it looks like kind of shale-like stuff that you can definitely run on if you've got the experience in that sort of terrain, or you may just choose to walk some of it because you don't like that kind of thing. But the first half is definitely very runnable. Second half, again, depending upon your likings. The only real call out on this section to me is if you hit it at night, there is a short portion of the race, or of the course there, that is also freezing cold, kind of like the one we described in the section out of Indian Creek. I didn't expect it. They've done that course 2 years now, and the first year I didn't expect it at all. I hit it at night and it was freezing and I wasn't quite prepared for it. The second year I was ready that it was going to be cold, but I knew it was going to be so short that I didn't actually add any extra layers because I got through it quickly. But I don't even remember exactly, but let's just call it this half mile section. The temperature just dropped, it felt like 10 degrees that it dropped. So there's that minor call out. What else? There was something odd the second year that could have just been, maybe it was my brain malfunctioning from lack of sleep because I hadn't slept yet in the race. But the GPS was showing the turn onto the trail that you referred to that was the link up with the original course route. It showed the turn several hundred yards before the turn actually existed, according to my GPX. Again, it could have been just something wrong with the satellite read that I was getting, and that's probably the case. So this may not happen to anybody else, but the turn, the sharp turn onto, I don't remember the name of the trail, but if you're seeing something on your tracker that is telling you to turn into a forested area that is thick with overgrowth for Moab, and there's clearly no trail, go another 100 or 200 yards and you'll probably bump into the real trail. Again, may have been a one-off thing with me just getting a bad satellite read on my location, but just be aware, because I wasted too much time trying to find this, quote, non-existent trail. Other than that, it's a pretty easy section. I'm going to give it a 2-ish. The only thing that would add the difficulty is running on the rocky stuff that I described earlier. But then you drop down towards Dry Valley, and you run through some pretty dusty stuff in that latter portion before you get onto the dirt road. But it's not all that bad. At any rate, you hit the dirt road and you're almost to the aid station, and then you're ready for the 26-mile road marathon.
And I think, these next couple of sections are probably going to be pretty low on the difficulty scale. I mean, at this point in the race, everything's difficult. You're 144 miles in at Dry Valley. Peter, did I pace you from Shea to Dry Valley, Peter?
Yeah, you paced me to Dry Valley.
That's where you found the head of lettuce out there?
Found the head of lettuce.
Full head of lettuce out there in the.
Did you? I mean, it's got some calories. Did you at least eat some of it?
He kicked it.
In your mind?
Dry Valley to Needles. All right, 144 to 157, 158-ish. I remember these sections pretty well out to Road 46. I feel like I remember the rest of the race here pretty vividly. I mean, these are as hard as you make them. The course isn't going to slow you down. The course isn't going to get in your way. It can be a little sandy. It can be a little dusty. If it's windy, it can be pretty miserable. But other than that, these are pretty chill sections, beautiful, big scenery where you're, big views in every direction. You're really just leaving, I believe, the Abajo Mountains and heading over to the La Salles now. So you're back down in the low valley connecting these two mountain ranges. Well, what do you think, Wes? As easy as I'm making it sound?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd give this section a 1. I'd give the next section a 1. The elevation profile on Dry Valley shows a lot of down. I'll tell you, my legs are typically tired enough that I never think it's down. I don't think it's up, but it feels at best like flat. So again, clearly you're dropping just a very, very slow rate as you go through that section. So don't expect a big push from gravity on it, but it's easy. A few little hills. Same as the next section.
Yeah. Okay. Then the next section is the Needles, mile 158 to Road 46, mile 170. Yeah. Like you're saying, easy. I think the only thing is if it's more mental than anything. You can see the La Salles way off in the distance through this whole stretch, and it just feels like it can't come soon enough. But easy. Yeah.
It's long, but there's just the Groundhog Day on these two sections. They're very similar.
Yeah. Yes. The only call out on this section, or maybe two call outs, would be the latter half. You can tell that you're going up. Again, it's a really gradual up that you're typically doing. There are a couple little steep hills, don't get me wrong, but generally you're moving up, but it's very gradual. A lot of that up is runnable if you've got the legs at that point to run gentle ups. And other than that, it can get really cold if it's early morning in this section. And I think probably the previous one as well. But this one has stood out to me more than the previous for being really cold at 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. time frame.
Yeah. Okay, so now we are we're Road 46 to Pole Canyon now. You've gotten through those two, like you said, that marathon in the middle of Moab here. Road 46 is a really easy crew aid station. It's just off the side of the main road out there in Moab. Very easy to get to, very not far. One of the easier, maybe not quite as easy as Amasa back, but pretty darn close, just because it's a little further out there, but it's a great aid station. Another aid station that you will want to make sure you take care before you leave. This is you're entering sort of the potential crux of the race. These next sections are very hard, and they really don't get easier until you finish the race. So leave Road 46 super prepared. I kind of liken this next section to that one before Shea Mountain, where it's like things are getting hard again. Like it's not quite that hard, but like you're definitely climbing. It's steep. It's good footing, but and pretty consistent. But you're going up pretty good. This is the section where I passed David Goggins when I ran the race.
Nice.
Just for those wondering.
Yes.
Have a picture of me in my ice cream cone shorts running right next to him. But yeah, it's 15 and a half miles, 3,500 feet of up, 700 feet of down. So it's a stout climb, but it's definitely a bit of a precursor. You're leaving the valley and getting into the LaSalle's. It's starting to get very pretty. You're starting to see all the fall colors. It's a really great section. These next few sections, I think, are just fantastic.
Yeah, I think you described it well, Kevin. Only things I'd add, that there is a very technical, I'll call it a short section. I don't remember exactly how long, maybe, I don't know, 500 yards, 1,000 yards, that after you start from the aid station, you go up to kind of this narrow, rocky ridge-like thing where you just got to watch your step. You get off of that, though, and it's not going to be that technical the rest of the way. There, despite all the climbing in the section, the middle portion is pretty runnable. If you're feeling good, there's some smooth sections of trail where there's some little ups, very runnable ups, and quite a few downs and flats that you can make some decent time in that middle portion of the race, and then, or of the section. And then, towards the end, as you get, closer to the mountains, you're starting to climb. By this point, you're on a dirt and or gravel road, depending upon which specific section you're on. But even on that climb, that on the elevation profile looks like this is going to be impossible to run, there's actually quite a few places, if you're trying to make some good time, where you can do little short runs, and then you're doing a hiking climb again, and then another short run, another little hiking, if that's your preference. Otherwise, certainly a lot of people are just going to choose to hike the whole thing just to save their legs, which is totally understandable. Probably it on that one. I'm gonna rank it as a 4. It's kind of like that Bridger Jack section when you're heading up to Bridger. Like you said, it's your warning that things are about to get really tough, because they are.
Yeah. So this next section, Pole Canyon, mile 185.5 to Geyser Pass, mile 200.5, so 15 miles, almost 5,000 feet of gain, about 4,000 feet of loss. And this is the site of my famous Bivy incident. So I don't know if
Peter,
you heard.
You died on this section, Peter.
Yeah, I died here. So I'm the poster child for not taking care of yourself at Road 46. So I was a zombie leaving Pole Canyon. I made it to the high point of the course, and then I just decided I had enough. And I went in my bivvy and slept for 4 hours.
I'm at Geyser Pass thinking, like, he's making great time. I got to get up there in the morning. I was at Geyser Pass for like 12 hours that day.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, if you sleep for 4 hours at the high point of the course, it is runnable the next 10 miles. That's at Geyser Pass. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a tough section. Mentally, it's often a tough section for me. I love climbing. My favorite thing to do is go out in the mountains and climb. And this has all of that. So in theory, I should always just love this section, but I don't always love this section. If I'm mentally tired, this course, especially at night, but even during the day, it can feel like you're just kind of winding around, maybe even winding back on yourself. And it feels like you're going nowhere, to me, at least sometimes, like I'm making no progress. It's tough. The only good thing from a comfort standpoint on this race, or in this section, is the fact that there's a lot of trees through a lot of it, and so you get some good cover from the sun if you're doing it during the day. Not all of it, but a lot of it. But it starts with a very tough climb up Doe Canyon, and it doesn't get a lot easier after that. Keep your eyes on the trail, because there are a few tough spots where you got to be paying attention to make the turn, but very challenging physically and mentally. Some years I love the section, some years I hate it. And Peter, you mentioned the descending, for the latter portion of it. And there are some great descents in this section that you can just run and enjoy. There's a long 2-mile one that's actually, it's pretty steep, and it's got some switchbacks that you got to put on the brakes for, but man, you can make some great time and just enjoy the section if you're in the right mental state. If you're not, you'll be like me sometimes and just be wondering when this thing is going to end. Even though I know the course, I'm hoping it's around the aid station is around the next corner. It ends then with some less aggressive terrain where you're just kind of winding through partially a burn area as you approach Geyser Pass, but it's not nearly as challenging as, say, the first half-ish of the section. And if I didn't mention it, it's a 5.
Yeah, this one's definitely a 5. The two that I figured you'd make 5s have both been 5s. They are hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, this section is something. I was really really grateful I've gotten to get up there in the daytime pacing and crewing versus when I ran it, it was all at night. It's just so pretty.
I'm actually, probably because of FOMO and not doing the race for the first time this year, I volunteered just to help somebody who had never done a 200 miler before. So I'm linking up with him specifically from Road 46 to Geyser, mostly because I thought it would be fun to hit Geyser again when I'm kind of not under personal race pressure,
Yeah.
to hopefully solidify in my mind that, yeah, this section isn't that bad.
Yeah. Nice. I love it. Yeah. My wife and I are still deciding. We have generous friends who said we could use their place that they have while we're out there. So we just got to see if we want to get dog coverage and make the trip out. So we're going to decide like tomorrow if we're going to leave on Thursday. So we'll see if we make it out there, but that's awesome. Cool. So we're getting close to the finish line here. You know, you just made it through the other 5 of the race, really hard section. This next section, I got Peter lost for 4 miles on this section. Sorry, Peter.
Where?
We missed the turn and just continued on the road. So when you take that steep climb up, and yeah, we just missed that turn off to that climb, and we just kept bombing down that road. We were moving so well, and we went 2 miles down the road. We had a cow that was like letting us hurt, like that was like self-hurting. Like we kept pushing a cow down the road, not intentionally, but it just happened.
Yeah.
So we were kind of playing that game with the cow, and all of a sudden, guys in like a UTV came in and found us, and we're like, "You guys are off course." And you're like, "Man,
Yeah.
so
Sucks.
don't miss the turn. It is well marked. It was well marked. We when we went back, we saw it was well marked. But at this point in the race, you could be pretty out there, and don't if you're bombing down a fire road, at some point you're going to make a right hand turn onto a steep, short trail climb. So this is Geyser Pass to Porcupine Rim, mile 200 to mile 221, 222 ish. 1,600 feet of ascent, about 4,000 feet of down. This section's really nice. The 2 things, in my opinion, that make this section hard are the length of it. It's a long stretch late in the race. And then just the location of it in the race being, north of 200 miles, like everything's going to be hard at this point. But like, I mean, if this was an early section, you'd be eating this up. This is a really nice section.
Yes. Yeah. I think the mentality going into this section of the race is really important if you're trying to, push for a PR or just get a good time, whatever, because you can make some great time once you get through the, we call it the single track section, and you're totally on dirt and or paved road. But there's a couple little tough climbs, especially if you're tired when you're leaving Geyser Pass. It's a steady, not super steep. It's steep enough that I think the vast majority of folks are going to hike it. I know I hike the vast majority of that portion to the road turnoff that you mentioned, or to turn off to the trail from the road. But then on that trail section to Uwal Lake, you've got some good descending. The descents are definitely runnable. There's a few steeper climbs in there, certainly, but as a whole, you can get some good running done on the way to Uwal Lake. Leaving Uwal Lake, I think it's mile 4.5, somewhere in there. You can get some water if you need it. And then you've got kind of a steep climb out of the Uwal Lake area. You descend just a little bit, and then you turn off back onto a trail, because at Uwal Lake, you're actually on a road for a very brief time. Kind of a tough little steep climb out of there. Beautiful area. Some great views of the trees changing color in that section, and then you get up and you hit a road, and you're on a road all the way to Porcupine Rim. Well, I take that back. There might be, trying to think if there is any road or any more trail after that. No, I think once you hit the road, as I recall, you're going to be on the road the whole way. And at any rate, you can make great time once you're on that road. If you've got the mentality of, hey, I'm going to make time here. If I'm being chased by cutoffs, or just trying for a good time, there's a lot of down, and it's as smooth as you're going to find on a dirt road. And then you hit some paved road through town, if I recall, and then it switches back to dirt as you turn off onto whatever they call that road that leads you to Porcupine Rim. Anyway, easy section. I won't belabor it. The only water I can recall is that early section, or the early stop at Uwal Lake. And there's some quad burning. You got to be ready for some quad burning if you're trying to make time. But if you've got the quads left at this point, burn them up. Save a little for the porcupine rim descent, but you can burn the squads a bit and make some fantastic.
All right, and then the last section of the race is that porcupine rim section, mile 221.5, all the way to the finish at 240, just over 18 miles, 950 feet up, but over 4,000 feet down. So to me, this is kind of a mean section to put at the end of a 200. It's quite long. That descent's tough, the slick rock. But yeah, it's an epic finish on that bike path all the way back to Moab.
Yeah. So I think I forgot to rate the previous section. I'll give it a 3 because of the first portion of it. So this section, 2 maybe. So it's a very enjoyable single track down. Porcupine Rim is a great trail. I've run it a couple times just when I was out in the Moab area, in addition to the times I've done it during the race. Very enjoyable. Possibly aside from the fact that you're just probably dying to get to the finish at this point. Very runnable trail. Certainly there's some ups along the way, but as a general statement, you're going down on terrain that if you've got the legs and if you've got the quads left, you can make great time and have a lot of fun. You go through the tunnel underneath the highway there when you're just, 6-ish miles out, 5 miles out. And then you're on the bike path, and that's not literally flat. Nothing ever is in a trail run, but it's pretty darn flat, with some gentle ups and downs where, again, if you got the legs, you can make some great time and enjoy those last miles to the finish.
Boom. We did it. Yeah. I think this is also another place where you're going to see like people again for the first time. If you're doing it during the day, you've probably not seen like a bunch of like other trail recreators like since like day one, maybe. So if you're hitting this during the day, there'll be a bunch of mountain bikers, there'll be a bunch of hikers. Like Wes said, it's just a beautiful, beautiful trail. Take a peek over the rim and look down into the Colorado River. There's some big step downs that if you happen to find yourself at mile 230, which you may, can be challenging.
Yes.
But yeah, like you said, it's if you feel good, it's there's nothing here that's going to really slow you down. And then you get on that single track before the bike path, and then yeah, the bike path is just your I think it's about 5K on the bike path, because I remember when I ran it, the only part I recorded was the bike path, and I just called it the Moab 5K. And yeah, it's a pretty cool finish heading back down to where you started. Wes, if you could come up with 3 just general tips for people about to start Moab, I feel like one that I heard is hydration.
Yes.
I think it's very important at this race in particular. But anything else, any other bits of wisdom you want to impart on these intrepid runners?
I touched on these earlier, but I think they're important points. Since I mentioned them before, I won't belabor them, hopefully. But sun exposure, you're gonna face it during the vast majority of the race. That's going to impact the speed you're moving at. It's going to fool you in terms of how much you're sweating if you're not prepared for it, because the sweat just evaporates immediately. And so you never feel sweaty, but you might be sweating a lot if it's a hot day in that exposure. So just build that into your hydration plan. Second would be poles. Poles are definitely needed at parts of this course. Again, my recommendation is either go with them from the start or start with them around Indian Creek or the island. I've done both versions of those. And depending upon my strategy in the race, I found it when I was trying to go really easy at the start and really save my legs on one year, I started with them from the beginning and used them from the beginning. Other years where I decided I could afford to burn my legs up just a little bit because I had done a lot of climbing in the training, then I held them off till Indian Creek. So again, very personal decision, but it's important to have them during those, certainly at least during the key times, like Pole Canyon, like Shea Mountain, etc. Boy, I'll just mention, even though it's a little late for folks for this year's race, but shoe choice. If you've got a choice between a shoe that fits perfectly, it doesn't let a bunch of dust into your shoes, those are the shoes to go with, versus a shoe that maybe has amazing traction, but yeah, you get some grit and grime in the shoe, or you occasionally get a blister on that 20-mile run. Not the right shoe to be wearing in a 240-mile race.
Yeah, agreed. That's great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Wes. This has been a really great preview, and we hope people get some good value out of it, and we hope you have fun out on your section out there this year.
Well, thanks, Peter, Kevin. Great chatting with you guys, and
we'll have you on again for your own episode soon. But we appreciate the assist on this one.
Yeah, no problem. I enjoyed it.
All right. Well, as I mentioned in that episode, I think Wes did a really good job of the rankings. I think I pretty much agree with him all the way. I think my memory of Porcupine Rim makes it a little harder than he made it sound, but other than that, I think those rankings were spot on, and I think he did a great job just painting the picture of Moab 240, and hopefully you listeners are feeling ready to go rock and roll.
Yeah, no, I agree. With the one caveat that Lockhart Basin, yes, it's easy, it's simple, but I think mentally that's going to be hard. So if it was mental, I might have ranked it a little different. But
Yeah, it's a grind through there. It's a long way of very similar terrain with very minimal change, minimal aid, minimal like just you're just out there.
yeah, if you can shut your brain off and don't think, just do, then you'll be good.
Yeah, just listen to this episode on repeat. Well, cool. Hopefully, people are feeling ready for Moab 240. Thanks for listening. If you're a new listener, I know we sometimes get new listeners on our course preview episodes. Thank you for being here. We are a podcast that talks all about 200 plus mile ultramarathons, and we hope you'll stick around. You can subscribe to be notified of new episodes on Apple and Spotify. You can leave us a review. That's always a great way to thank us for doing these previews. We love reading your reviews. You can actually write the reviews on Apple, whereas Spotify is just a 1 through 5 star review. And I'd like to take a moment before we get into our favorite category here to thank our sponsors. So we are sponsored by John G and Mount to Coast. We love both of these brands. They both are focused on sustainability and just make really good shit. I recently put the new Mount to Coast H1 through the absolute ringer at Mammoth 200. I didn't plan on starting in the H1s, but I did. I didn't plan on wearing the H1s the entire race, but I did. I certainly didn't plan on being in the same pair of socks and not even touching my shoes for the entire duration of Mammoth 200, but I did. I think it was a feet PR for me, where I was my feet were really happy in those H1s, and as we talked about with Wes, I think fit over function is really important for these multi-day races. So even if it's not quite the perfect shoe for the course, if it's the perfect shoe for your foot, that's the way to go. And everyone's different, but we've really been digging running in our Mount to Coast shoes. So you can check them out. Check out John G. They make all sorts of amazing gear for hot weather, cold weather, and everything in between. And if you want to support us, you can use code DISTANCE for either of those brands at John G or Mount to Coast. And if you shoot us a Instagram message or an email at distancetoemptypod@gmail.com, just letting us know that you placed an order using our code, we will shoot you a free shirt, free cool Distance to Empty shirt. So we'd love to get you from some free swag for supporting our sponsors. For John G, there's a post-purchase survey that asks how you heard about the brand. You can select podcast, and then a list of podcasts will pop up. And you can select Distance to Empty, take a picture of that, show it to us, and we'll shoot you a free shirt in the mail. Just let us know your name, address, size, and we'll hook you up. Anything else I'm forgetting, Peter?
No, just that I did actually start running in the H1s. I did run like a week ago. I don't know if you saw that. I did like an 8-mile trail run, but they were surprisingly grippy. It was a punchy little route I was on. I had traction with the H1s.
Yeah,
they're hybrid.
I mean, I did the whole Mammoth course with them. There were a couple of times where who knows, I might have slipped in any shoe, right? But a couple of times where I slipped and I was like, oh, I am wearing like a lighter trail shoe here. But again, like my feet were happy, so it was totally worth it. The T1s from Mount to Coast are much more aggressive. We really like those too. I think I am going to try changing the top laces on the T1s and having just the dialed fit on the bottom set of laces. If you're not familiar, there's like a unique lacing system on the Mount to Coast shoes that are really cool. So check them out. And yeah. All right, should we play Let's Get Deep? All right, so Peter and I have a variety of categories that we go through on the podcast. This episode's a long one, so we're only going to do our favorite category here today. It is Let's Get Deep. It is a card game for couples that Peter and I play on the podcast for your enjoyment. There are 3 categories: Icebreaker, Deep, and Deeper. Peter, I'll kick you off with your Icebreaker. Who is your current celebrity crush? I think I know the answer.
Celebrity crush. Why am I drawing a blank? What do you think it is?
I think is it Charlie XCXE or is whatever her name is?
Yeah, Charlie XCX. Yeah, I think you're right. Okay. That Brat album is great for running. Yeah. All right. Your Icebreaker. What is your least favorite holiday?
I mean, I'm a big fan of holidays. Like, love Christmas, love Halloween, Thanksgiving's usually fun. Maybe Easter. Like, it used to be fun as a kid, but like I feel like I don't even, Easter kind of comes and goes a little unceremoniously for me lately. So I'll go with Easter as my least favorite holiday. I'm counting like major holidays, not like, I don't know, even Valentine's Day or like those types of holidays. I'm not counting.
You don't like chocolate?
I mean, I like chocolate. I
So
like
you can buy yourself a giant
I do
chocolate
like
bunny.
Easter. I do like Easter candy and like the eating the ears off the bunny. That's always fun. All right, deep for you. If you won the lottery today, what would be the first thing you spent your money on?
Maybe I'd get the new Garmin Phoenix 8 Pro, so I have the inReach built in.
The battery life on that micro LED thing is like pretty bad though compared to the other watches.
I wouldn't get the micro LED. I would just get the AMOLED that has that
Okay.
stuff.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. My watch lasted the whole Mammoth. I didn't charge it once.
The Enduro 3,
The Enduro 2.
the Enduro 2.
Yeah.
Wow,
I had 9% left when I finished.
crazy.
Isn't it?
Were you worried about it?
Not really, because I remember when I was like 170 miles in, I like checked and I had like 39% battery left, and I was like, oh, that's fine.
All right, you're deep. What is a problem that deserves more attention than it's getting right now?
You know, I'll stick with something that I want to like dive into on the podcast. I've been thinking it'd be fun to have a environmentalist or like someone who specializes in environmental science, someone who works for the Parks Service or the National Forest Service to come on the podcast and chat about like the impact of climate change on these races that we love and run. Like, you know, you see what happens to Oregon every year, and like so many of these big races that are like multi-agency permitted are being affected by fires and air quality and all these other natural phenomenons that seem to be happening more and more frequently. So, yeah, I'll just say in general, like climate change and like the impact of it on our sport.
Oh, you went deep.
Not to get all political, but I think it'd make for a fascinating episode, and it's something I've been thinking about quite a bit lately.
No, I agree. I listened to a podcast about forest fires actually a couple months ago. That was interesting.
Yeah. All right. Deeper for you. Have you ever been in a car accident? What happened?
I've been in a couple. Well, I've been in one car-to-car accident and one car-to-bike accident.
Oof.
I could do the car-to-bike accident. That one's maybe more interesting. So
Is that where you broke your collarbone?
That's where I broke my collarbone. So I was, there's a local mountain here called Recreation Area Chantry, and there's a road that goes up to it. And I was descending the road. I was in my lane. Everything's going great. I go around a blind corner, and there is a car driving uphill on the wrong side of the road. And we had a head-on collision. I made a last-second evasive maneuver, but I still hit the car, went over the hood. I landed upside down, broke my collarbone. And I guess it could have been a lot worse. Their excuse was they were all like 16, 17, and they swore they saw a sign that gave them the impression that all lanes went the same way uphill, and there must have been some other road that went downhill. So anyway, yeah, that was wild.
Well, it could have been a lot worse.
All right. You're deeper. What's a lesson you learned the hard way?
I'll just go with recency bias here, that you do need to sleep in 200 plus mile races if you're going to be out there for almost 60 hours. You know, we talked a lot about my no sleep experiment at Mammoth, which we will dive into ad nauseum when we finally do our Mammoth content. But spoiler alert, it was rough. I did get through with no sleep, but I think what I learned is like I would push sleep further out than I had historically tried to do. Like usually trying to sleep, you know, early in on night 2, somewhere around the mile 130 to 150, where I think I would probably push it to like 170 to 190, either like just before dawn on night 2, day 3, or even into day 3. But things got pretty weird for the last 15 or so miles of Mammoth without any sleeps.
I called you at hour 55, and you were
I forgot about
not
that.
there. You were not present.
I forgot about that. Yeah, I just kind of like mumbled and grunted to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. I totally forgot about that. Yeah. So, yeah, make sure you sleep. Cool. Well, hope you guys enjoyed this Moab 240. Man, I still got Mammoth on the brain. You know, still recovering. Hope you enjoyed this Moab 240 course preview episode. One last thing I want to call out, something that's been really fun and just kind of seems to be picking up steam. We do have a Patreon, so we keep these main weekly episodes coming at you for free for everyone. But if you want more content, more of Peter and I, more of our ramblings and banter, we do have a Patreon that's been really fun. We do monthly bonus episodes. We have a Discord that's been pretty active and awesome. And we had 6 or so subscribers out at Mammoth, and it was really fun to connect. Yeah, it's just been really awesome. So we'd love to have you in our Patreon community. If you want more Distance to Empty content, we have 3 different tiers. You can check those out in the show notes. And one call out to our highest tier, which just started kind of picking up steam. I think it's a really amazing value. It is expensive. It's $119 a month, but it is essentially semi-custom group coaching for all the major 200s. So if you're running one of the major 200s that are talked about in the link in the show notes, and you're looking for coaching but don't want to pay the price for full one-on-one coaching, it's a really cool group coaching option. And honestly, while it's still small right now, it kind of is like one-on-one coaching. Maybe with the exception of getting a bunch of phone calls, you're kind of getting the one-on-one coaching. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to us directly. But it's been really cool to build this and see it grow. Thank you for listening. Good luck at the Moab 240, and we'll catch you next time. Bye, Peter.
Bye, Kevin.